Hope you enjoyed that last number.
VATS, or vault-tec assisted targeting system, is a feature in Fallout 4 that allows you to spend your action points in exchange for letting the game do the aiming and shooting for you. It is a system that you can pretty much ignore completely, and given how manual shooting in Fallout 4 feels much better than in the previous games, that is not an uncommon sentiment. Still, you would be ignoring a substantial and quite frankly, very deep aspect of gameplay if you were to do that. Let's go over everything there is to know about VATS, and I hope that by the end of this video, you will have gained a greater appreciation and understanding of this system. Note, I won't be covering melee or unarmed in VATS, as it's kind of its own separate thing, and in my opinion, not as interesting as ranged weapons. Despite being introduced in Fallout 3 and tweaked in New Vegas, VATS in Fallout 4 is a bit of a different beast. First of all, time isn't stopped while you're queuing up shots. It will instead slow dramatically. Enemies will continue to move and can potentially relocate to cover or even kill you, though it doesn't happen as much as you might think. The universe will no longer wait for you while you're queuing up shots, and this increases the pace of the game. Second, you will gain a massive amount of damage reduction while the computer is doing its thing. This was also present in New Vegas, but not nearly to the same extent. This damage reduction isn't going to kick in before you initiate the sequence, so you're still vulnerable while lining up shots. This does allow you to survive hits that you'd have no chance of surviving otherwise and can be exploited, though that period of time is very short. Third, critical hits have also been overhauled, and with very few exceptions, are exclusive to VATS. And finally, you can now cancel a VATS sequence, which also refunds the remaining action points. No more fruitless wallbangs and wasted ammo. As you queue up your shots, you will see parts of the enemy's health bar blinking. This is the estimated damage that the shots would deal if they were to hit, and unlike the previous games, they are mostly accurate. If you can guarantee that the shots hit, you can make more efficient use of your ammo and AP. The maximum displayed chance to hit on a VATS attack will always be 95%. I have absolutely no way to prove this, but take it from someone who plays with VATS almost exclusively. I think it can reach 100%, it just always displays 95. When one of those phantom 100% shots doesn't hit, it is due to something getting in the way. Again, this is pure speculation, and I'd love to be proven wrong or right about it. Every type of enemy has different body parts that can specifically be aimed with VATS. Human enemies, for instance, have the head, torso, left and right arms, and left and right legs. Individual body parts also have their own separate health values. If that is depleted, the body part in question will be crippled. Limb damage is a separate statistic that works alongside regular damage, and while it doesn't increase the damage you deal to the overall health of the enemy, it will decrease the amount of damage needed to cripple a body part. There hasn't been a lot of documentation on what the exact effects are for crippled limbs on enemies, and it is kind of hard to test, so unless I'm entirely sure about it, I'll avoid speaking of it. Hitting the head will typically deal 2 times as much damage, not just on humans, but on most creatures. The exception to that are robots, that actually receive decreased damage to the head. As a counterbalance, the head is usually the hardest part to hit. On human targets, the base chance to hit the head is half of what the torso is. The torso is usually the easiest part to hit, but there doesn't seem to be an effect to crippling it. Crippling the arm, or both arms, of a gun-wielding enemy will decrease their accuracy. Crippling a leg will slow the movement of most enemies, and crippling both legs can make them immobile. When a limb becomes crippled, the enemy will usually perform a clutch in pain animation, and the VATS camera will zoom in on the body part. Human enemies can heal their health and limbs with a stim pack if they happen to have one in their inventory. The fun thing here is that your own limbs can become crippled too. Broken arms will severely decrease your accuracy, both inside and outside of VATS, and crippled legs will slow your movement speed. A crippled head will incur a penalty to your perception and also cause your vision to be blurry. There are a lot of factors that influence your chance to hit in VATS, the least of which being the distance and size of your target. Let us begin with the most complicated, the weapon and its modifications, and we'll start this off with a little game. Of all these stats here, which ones do you think affect the weapon's performance in VATS? If you answered range and accuracy, then you are correct. Anything else is irrelevant for us. The higher these two values are, the better the chances to hit. If we mod this Gatling laser and gamma gun to have similar range and accuracy values, their chances to hit are likewise similar. Same goes for the railway rifle and the missile launcher. We can even mod the hunting and combat rifle to have identical values, and their hit chances remain the same. This indicates that VATS hit chance has nothing to do with the weapon type. If a shotgun or a plasma flamer could get the exact range and accuracy values as a fully pimped out Gauss rifle, their chances to hit would be the same. Let's play another game. Of these two 308 revolvers, which one do you think is going to have the better chance to hit in VATS? The one with the higher accuracy stat, or the one with the higher range stat? If you answered the more accurate one, then I am afraid the logical choice is wrong. For reasons that are not obvious, even after extensive testing, range consistently has a higher magnitude on VATS hit chance than accuracy. Let's take one of those 308 revolvers and evolve it down to its very basic form. With a 61 point accuracy stat, at a medium range, our revolver has a 3% chance to hit the head, 6 for the torso, 4 for the arms, and 5 for the legs. Let us improve the accuracy stat by 10 points by adding a high-end stock to the weapon and see how the percentages improve. That's pretty underwhelming. Chance to hit for the arms went up by 1%, but the rest of the parts remained the same. Let's go even further with the long scope and get the final number up to 107. Better than before, but still pretty bad. Legs and torso went up by 1%, but the head has stayed the same throughout the trials. Let's do a similar test with range now. By increasing the gun's range by 36 points from a longer barrel, we essentially double our chances to hit on all body parts. Compare that to the 46 points of accuracy that barely did anything. The long barrel pumps our range to 203 and improves our chances to hit by 8 to 9 times as when compared to the standard variant. The barrels do give a very marginal increase to accuracy, but as we saw before, even large increases of the stat barely have an impact. Range is doing most of the heavy lifting here. But what happens when we combine both accuracy and range boosts? Here, something interesting seems to happen. Not only is our hit chance improved, but when the recoil compensating stock previously improved our accuracy stat by 10 points, it now does the same by 13. The same is true for the scope, that now yields a 37 point increase instead of 36. If I had to guess, the accuracy stat is calculated after the range stat. But what about perception? The in-game tooltips state that higher levels of perception increase the chances to hit in VATS, but how much is it really? If you Google this question, you'll get figures ranging from 3% to 10%. Let's take the crappy 308 revolver pistol, use console commands to lower our perception to 1, and see how gradually increasing the stat up to 11 is going to influence our accuracy at medium range. Here's the chart. There definitely are improvements, but they're quite minuscule. Maybe perception will have a greater effect at long range. This is the furthest distance VATS is able to pick up, and my PC can render the target, and we're going to do the same test here. The exact same results. Doesn't look very good for perception, but don't toss it out yet. Let's do this test again, this time with the fully pimped out 308 revolver rifle. Now let's try long range. If you want perception to have an effect, then you're going to have to use a decent weapon in the first place. Based on these tests, perception seems to boost our chances to hit by 5%, with level 10 giving a 50% boost, while level 20 gives a 100% boost. Someone smarter than me is going to have to work out the exact formulas on how the final VATS accuracy is calculated, but I think we've laid out a fairly reasonable groundwork here and can go forward. There are also two legendary effects that influence VATS hit chance: vats-enhanced and stalkers. Vats-enhanced simply adds a multiplicative 33% boost to your final hit chances, while stalkers doubles that chance when you are not in combat at twice the AP cost. To use VATS, you will need action points or AP. You will have a base AP of 60 that is increased by 10 for every level of agility you have. Since you can never have less than 1 agility, you are guaranteed to have 70 AP at almost all times. An agility of 5 will grant 110 AP, and agility of 10 will give 160. AP can be increased even further with gear, perks, or consumables that we'll cover later on. AP regenerates by 6 points per second by default, meaning that it takes a little under 17 seconds to fully regenerate your action points from 0. Again, there are ways to increase this regen speed that will be revealed later. The higher your total AP, the more individual points you will recover per second. Now that we've established the stats that modify our weapon's hit chances, does this mean that we'll just mod every weapon to have the highest range and accuracy values? Not so fast. You'll have to take the AP costs into consideration too. Every weapon in the game has a base AP cost that can either be increased or decreased with its modifications. Here is a list of the base AP costs for all the ranged weapons in the game and the DLCs. I do admit I pretty much copy-pasted these numbers straight from the Fallout wiki and didn't do separate testing to confirm them, as it would take far too much of my time. But they do line up with my own experience of playing the game. Now these can be modified with weapon mods. Increases and decreases to AP costs are applied additively, despite the fact that they show a percentage in the mod that I'm using. If a 30 AP weapon has a mod that increases AP cost by 30% and one that decreases it by 10, then the total AP cost is going to be 20% higher, or 36. On ballistic weapons, AP costs can be affected by the receiver, barrel, stock, sight, and the magazine. As far as I can tell, muzzle mods have no effect. The standard, hardened, powerful, and the calibrated receiver variants will not change the AP cost for the gun by themselves. The heavy and any automatic receivers will incur a 25% AP increase, with the hardened piercing automatic receivers giving a 35% increase. The light variants will give a 25% decrease to the AP costs. The tuned and hair trigger mods will give a 10% decrease. Advanced and ammo conversion modes either don't affect AP costs or decrease it by 10%. This is dependent on the type of the weapon. What immediately jumps out are the automatic variants. None of them affect the AP costs positively. While automatic weapons do fire 3-round bursts in VATS, and technically each shot uses less AP than with a standard receiver, the decrease in range and damage really isn't worth it. An automatic VATS build is certainly viable, but there just isn't much synergy and feels a little awkward. The tuned and hair trigger mods can be used as stopgaps until you get better ones, but you're generally going to want the calibrated, advanced, or the higher caliber conversions. While the calibrated mods by themselves don't offer an AP decrease, their synergy with critical hits is undeniable. Conversion and advanced mods don't always give an AP decrease, but they always have the best AP to damage ratio without critical hits, so there's still something you're going to want. The light frame mod is definitely appealing at first, but the severe decrease in damage just makes the weapon unviable in the later stages of the game, unless you use it alongside very specific legendary mods. For the barrels, we already saw that the longer variants have a higher increase in range, but this comes at the cost of AP. Short barrels either don't affect AP costs at all, or provide a 5% decrease. Long barrels provide a 20% increase. It's a trade-off. You're going to have to ask yourself if you want more shots in VATS at the cost of hit chance, or viability at long range at the cost of AP. A good compromise here, for weapons where they are available, are the long light barrels that provide the same boost as the regular one, but only at a 10% AP increase. The exception to this rule are the pistols, where the long barrel mode doesn't affect AP at all. It might not be very obvious, but mag size increases also have an effect. The standard mags don't affect AP costs, but a larger mag size can give a 5 to 10% increase. Conversely, the quick eject modes will provide a 5% AP cost decrease, and the larger quick eject mags also have the 5% decrease, or the effects cancel each other out. The stocks can be confusing. The short ones will not affect AP costs, but the larger ones, like full stocks or the recoil compensating stocks, can increase the cost by 20 or 30%. Pipe weaponry are a bit of an exception in that they can be modified to either be pistols or rifles. In that case, the standard stocks gives a 20% increase. The basic and comfort pistol grips will see no change to AP, while the sharpshooter pistol grip gives a 5% decrease. Given how the stocks only increase accuracy and those boosts are very low on their own, you should always use the shortest stocks in a rifleman build. For the sights, regular ones don't change anything. Close sights decrease the cost by 5 or 7.5%, and perhaps surprisingly, a reflex sight will decrease the AP cost by 15%. Conversely, the longer scopes, including the night vision and recon variants, will give a 30, 40 or a 50% increase to AP depending on their zoom level. Unless you're using a very specific build that we're going to cover later on, you should stay away from the true scopes. As with the larger stocks, the minor increases to accuracy are not going to be worth it. So, higher caliber conversions, calibrated or advanced receivers, quick eject mags, shorter stocks, and reflex sights. The barrel and the suppressor are entirely dependent on your own playstyle and preference. An example here is a hunting rifle that has a good balance between accuracy and AP costs. But what about the Gauss rifle that has entirely different categories of mods? Oddly enough, the barrel and stock see no change to AP costs, so unless you're worried about weapon weight, there's really no point to not upgrading them. The higher end capacitors do increase AP costs, but it's a very slight amount when compared to the amount of damage you get, so the AP to damage ratio is still going to be improved. To make the Gauss rifle even more appealing, your character will only fire the charged shots in vats, so for long range damage output, nothing beats the Gauss. As we are already teetering on the line between energy and ballistic weapons, let's jump over to the laser gun. The capacitor modes don't change the AP costs at all, but you're probably going to want to pick the exciter, agitator, or the overcharge modes over the burning modes. Barrels get interesting though, as unlike ballistic weapons, they essentially turn the laser gun into an entirely different weapon. The short barrels yield no change to AP, but their range and damage is also the lowest. Automatic barrels are similar to the automatic receivers in how they change the AP to damage ratio, decrease damage, and plus 35 AP per burst, but they do give a fairly high range increase, so it is something to consider. The long barrel provides even better range and damage than the short barrel at the cost of 20% more AP, while the sniper barrel yields the highest range and damage at the cost of 45% more AP. Sniper barrels also have a charge mechanic, where in order to deal full damage, you have to wait for the barrel to charge before you fire. As with the Gauss rifle, you will only fire the charged shots in vats. Laser gun stocks follow the same rules as pipe weaponry, as you can convert your laser into either a pistol or a rifle. The only difference here is the short stock that pipes don't have, in that they turn the weapon into a rifle only at the cost of 10% more AP. Scopes follow the same rules as ballistics, and muzzle modes don't affect AP costs, but do take note of the beam focuser modes that give a substantial increase to range, basically for free. As before, use the shortest stock for rifles or the sharpshooter grip for pistols, and the barrel is going to depend on what type of weapon you're going to want. For plasma weapons, the rules for capacitors are going to be the same as lasers, along with the short and sniper barrels. Where it gets different though are the splitter and flamer barrels. Splitters give your weapon a shotgun-like spread at a whopping 110 extra AP cost. It also decreases your range and accuracy, and overall, I don't think it's worth it. The Flamer sees no change in AP, but decreases your range to the point where it's only effective at point blank ranges. It can be powerful, but it's a little awkward and entirely up to you. For the stocks, there is no sharpshooter grip that gives an AP decrease, nor are there any muzzle mods. But what about heavy weapons? The only one really worth using in VATS is the Gatling laser, as it has both the overcharged and agitator modes available without changing the AP costs. The charging barrel mode does give a 25% AP cost increase, but the trade-off for the increased damage is definitely worth it, and you can counter that with the reflex sight. I have mentioned critical hits on a few occasions, and how they are tied almost exclusively to VATS. Unlike the previous games, they no longer occur randomly. Instead, successful hits in VATS will gradually increase your critical meter, and when it is filled, you can activate it, depleting the bar and causing the next shot to deal critical damage. The rate at which the meter fills is influenced by luck, with higher levels decreasing the amount of shots needed to refill the bar. Critical hits will never miss, and are even capable of hitting enemies behind cover so long as the shot was queued before the enemy hit behind something. The formula for calculating critical damage is pretty complicated, and it's entirely possible I'll make some minor mistakes in the examples I'm going to show, but let's try it anyway. The formula itself looks like this, and again, I would like to thank the Fallout wiki for that. Listed damage is the damage value shown on your Pip-Boy when examining the gun. This is the damage the weapon deals when all damage boosts are taken into account. The base damage is the damage the gun deals without taking any perks or other damage boosts into account. However, it does factor in the damage increases from your weapon modifications. For example, on a naked build, the base damage of an unmodified 10mm pistol is 18, but the hardened mode adds 4 points of damage to it for a total of a 22 base damage rating. And finally, the base damage is multiplied by the crit multiplier. This is the total number of the following: weapon mods like the photon exciter or calibrated receivers, skill mags like guns and bullets, bobbleheads that increase crit damage, and a better criticals perk. All of those critical multipliers are combined and added to a base value of 1. That's a lot of information at once, so let's see if we can illustrate it with an example. Let's take a basic unmodified 10mm pistol and test it out against this settler/target dummy. While you can't see her exact health values, through a variety of tests, I verified that she has a little over 110 points of health. Without any points in Gunslinger, the standard 10mm deals 18 damage, and this is going to be the base damage value used in the calculation. Because this is also the damage listed on the Pip-Boy, the damage value is going to be the same for the listed damage too. As I currently have no crit boosts, the critical multiplier has nothing to use, so the base damage is only going to be multiplied by 1. With a standard receiver, our critical hit is going to end up with 36 damage, but what happens when we use the calibrated one that has a quote 100% extra critical hit damage? As the basic calibrated receiver doesn't add any damage to non-critical shots, both the base damage and listed damage values remain the same. What does change is the crit multiplier. The calibrated mode adds a 2 to the multiplier, meaning that the base damage is going to be multiplied by 3, and that is going to be added on top of the listed damage for a total of 72 critical hit damage. Might as well see how better criticals work too. Each rank of the perk adds a 0.5 to the crit multiplier, and with a standard receiver and all 3 ranks, the crit damage is going to be 63. Now, let's take both the calibrated receiver and all 3 better critical perks, and our final critical shot is going to be 99 damage. I hope you're ready for this to get even more complicated, as now we're going to see what happens when we put 3 points into Gunslinger, increasing the damage we deal with the 10mm by 60%. Our listed damage is now 28, so that is the figure we're going to have to use in our calculations. With the standard receiver, our critical is going to deal 46 damage. Now, let's add the calibrated receiver for a higher critical multiplier, 82 damage. And both the calibrated receiver and better critical perks combine for a 109 damage shot, almost enough to end the misery of our organic target dummy. So far, we haven't been able to change our weapon's base damage, but that is going to change once we install the calibrated powerful receiver. This changes our listed damage to 43, but the base damage for it is 27, and we can see that when we view the mod without any points in Gunslinger. Let's see how this performs. She will always leave 1 in my data. And here's the fun part. I actually didn't have the better criticals for this one. Let's see the formula. In case you're curious, here's how this would have worked with all 3 ranks of better criticals. This goes to show that you shouldn't focus purely on critical damage boosts, as they still need raw damage to work off of, and why the advanced and high caliber conversion modes are still top tier, despite having no innate critical damage boosts. But this begs the question, what is the difference in critical damage between an advanced or a high caliber conversion mode over a powerful calibrated receiver? Meet Target Dummy. He is here to replace the original dummy who disappeared under mysterious circumstances and has 925 health and 25 damage resistance. With maxed out Rifleman, let's use a combat rifle that can either be converted into a 308 weapon or installed with a calibrated powerful receiver. Definitely in favor of the calibrated, but do remember that you'll only see its benefits when performing critical hits, that you are not always guaranteed to have. Plus, it doesn't even come close to a fully upgraded Gauss rifle, despite it having no equivalent to the calibrated mode. There is also the lucky legendary effect, which as far as I can tell, adds a 2 to the crit multiplier, much like a calibrated mode. It also increases the rate at which every shot fills the crit meter. I should also mention that energy weapons have the boosted photon agitator mode that adds a 4 instead of 2 as with the calibrated modes to the crit multiplier, but energy weapons do suffer from a bug that causes them to deal disproportionately less damage the higher the target's energy resistance. I'm not going to cover it here, as I'm not even entirely sure how it works. Just that if you've noticed energy weapons dealing less damage than they should, that is probably why, and it's why the quadruple boost isn't going to be as game breaking as you might think. Similarly, there are also claims that critical hits ignore damage resistances, so let's put that to the test. We've modded Target Dummy to the point where he now has 225 points of damage resistance, while his health remains at 925. I used the same combat rifle crits against him, and the answer seems to be no. Armor definitely has an impact here, just don't ask me how any of this works here, as türa ma ei hakka selles videos ka damage resistance rääkima. Perhaps I'll save it for another video. Here are some perks that either directly or indirectly improve VATS usage. I won't be focusing on the melee ones, so no, I haven't forgotten Blitz. It just kinda deserves its own separate thing. Armorer gives access to the light and ultralight armor modes that increase the amount of AP you have. For a pure VATS build, you're going to want most, if not all of your pieces, to have those. A torso and all 4 limbs equipped with ultralight modes give a 30 AP increase, equivalent to 3 points of agility. The second rank of awareness gives 5% extra damage and accuracy to VATS attacks. I did the testing and it pretty much behaves like a point in perception, except that it requires 2 perk points to unlock. Unless you already have the first rank, it is better to use those points to max out your perception first, before getting awareness too, as the damage increase isn't all that noticeable. The 4th rank of Demolitions Expert causes any explosive shot with VATS to deal twice as much damage. That is on top of A. Explosives already being very powerful, and B. Buffed by the passive effect of the perk itself. Definitely something to consider, even if you're not running a pure VATS build, and it not only works on your own grenades, but even those thrown by the enemy. Do keep in mind, however, that smaller and moving targets, like grenades, have a high tendency to miss when shot with vats, even with a 95% hit chance, so just to be safe, use a critical hit. Night Person gives +2 to intelligence and perception between the hours of 6 PM and 6 AM, with the second rank increasing that to 3. The stats don't immediately jump out at first, but there is great synergy for a stealthy vats build, as you are harder to detect at night. Just keep in mind that the second rank gives a night vision effect when you are sneaking that many people really despise, and the third rank's 30 extra HP is laughably low at that stage in the game. Sniper is a strange perk. The first rank has absolutely no benefit for vats, while the third rank works only in vats by giving scoped rifles a 25% boost to hit the head. You might think it works like 5 extra levels of perception specifically for the head, but it's actually much better. Rather than increasing the chance to hit the head by 25%, Sniper 3 adds a flat 25% boost to your chances to hit the head. What this means is that this boost is added on top of the normal headshot chances that are typically half of what the torso chances are. This is not dependent on distance either, so it's entirely possible to have scenarios where the headshot chances are higher than anywhere else on the board. Why the fuck am I hearing air raid sirens? Now, the scopes in question don't include the reflex sight, only the short, medium and long scopes, but they do include the night vision and recon variants. It's going to take a lot of AP to fire the weapon, but that boost is massive, especially when we combine that with one other perk that we're going to cover soon. Penetrator is another perk that is much better than it first appears. The first rank lets you target body parts obscured by cover with decreased accuracy, while the second rank removes the accuracy penalty. What's not immediately obvious here is that it doesn't just apply to enemies hidden by cover. It also makes it easier to hit body parts that are obscured by the enemy itself, like when they're positioned awkwardly. In fact, you've been seeing the perk work this entire time throughout the tests. The numbers wouldn't have been as pretty and consistent without Penetrator. It doesn't work with certain shots, like plasma or explosive, and there is actually a decrease to damage when you do wallbang someone. Still not sure if it's intentional or not. Also, in order to actually make use of the perk, the enemy needs to be able to be targeted in vats in the first place, so someone completely obscured by cover won't work. Still, being able to easily target weak points, or not have your previously queued shots go to waste when the enemy makes it to cover in the middle of a sequence, is great. It also lets you do shit like this. Concentrated fire provides increased accuracy for every shot on a given body part, with the third rank giving a 20% damage increase on subsequent shots as well. The description might be a little misleading, as while the accuracy continues to increase, the 20% extra damage will not. The perk is clearly designed for low range weapons that typically have low AP costs, like the short barrel weapons. On already accurate weapons, like long barrel hunting rifles, it's not going to get as much benefit. I actually think that 20% damage boost is a better reason to get Concentrated Fire 3. Your first shot can be a regular one, and then you can use a crit. Even if the first shot misses, your crit will still receive the increased damage. The fourth rank of Lone Wanderer gives you a 25 point boost to action points when you travel without a companion. There really is nothing more to say, other than it's better to just max out your agility first, unless you already have the first 3 ranks, and that you need to be level 50 to unlock it. The first rank of Attack Dog causes any enemy tackled by Dogmeat to be easier to hit in vats. It works similar to Sniper 3 by adding a flat plus 15% boost, but this time it is on all limbs and works with all weapons. The downside here is that it's pretty situational. You not only need to have Dogmeat as a companion, but the perk only activates while he is tackling the enemy. It all comes down to your own playstyle, but it needs to be mentioned that traveling with Dogmeat doesn't interfere with the effects of Lone Wanderer. Vans might be an infamously bad perk, but the second rank gives your character a permanent plus 2 points of perception. As with the awareness perk, it is better to max out perception normally first, but after that, Vance makes it entirely possible to have 12 to 14 perception at all times without any other boosts. I am lumping Gun Nut and Science together here, as both let you craft relevant weapon mods at workbenches. I will mention that I personally do not rank these perks as highly as some people do, as most weapon mods can already be found on weapons in the world as loot or purchased from vendors. These mods can then be replaced with something else, causing the desired mod to appear in your inventory, ready to be put into your preferred weapon without any requirements in Gun Nut or Science. I see it as a convenience perk, not as something mandatory, but your mileage may vary. Chemist affects the duration of chems. There's a few chems that give very powerful boosts to VATS, and having them available for longer, especially with the Biocom Mesh Armor mod, is an obvious advantage. Gunslinger deserves a special mention. I didn't specifically point out Rifleman, as none of its effects specifically boost VATS, but Gunslinger is an exception. The second rank grants pistols 25% more range, while the third gives 50. As we saw before, range is the primary stat used to calculate VATS hit chance, and as pistols tend to have lower AP costs, you really get the feeling that they were specifically designed with VATS in mind. The most accurate VATS sniping weapon isn't a rifle, it's a laser sniper pistol. Don't ask me how he managed to be so accurate with such an unwieldy weapon. The 3 ranks of Action Boy granted 25, 50 and a 75% increase to AP regeneration speed, decreasing the downtime you might experience with a heavy VATS build. Don't forget that a higher AP point value will cause you to receive even higher benefits from this perk, as it affects your total AP. The second rank of Quick Hands removes the costs of reloading in VATS. There is a bit of synergy here, as remember that larger mags increase AP costs, while the basic quick eject mags decrease them. The third rank gives a permanent 10-point boost to action points, but it is better to max agility out first before taking this perk. Gun Fu is a perk that is sometimes lambasted for being too situational, and I used to think that way too, but it has now become my favorite perk in the game. The first rank gives a 25% damage increase to the second target queued up in VATS. The second rank increases the damage dealt to the third target by 50%, and the third rank causes every shot fired at the fourth target and beyond to be a critical hit. The automatic critical hit will not burn your crit meter, and receives all the damage boosts mentioned in the original formula, plus it has great synergy with certain legendary effects, like Relentless. This is one of those perks where you really have to accommodate your playstyle for, either being tanky or stealthy enough to position yourself for a multi-target VATS sequence, but the payoffs are definitely worth it. Even the first rank's 25% damage increase is substantial, and not too difficult to pull off, plus the first shots don't even have to hit for the following targets to receive the increased damage. Prioritizing weaker and easier to hit enemies, while making your way to the more dangerous ones, and saving the guaranteed crits for high priority targets, or those about to hit cover, is an immensely satisfying and effective strategy. Keep in mind that you cannot ping-pong between targets for the increased damage. Switching back to the second target from the third will still have it deal 25% more damage. Mysterious Stranger gives the eponymous stranger a chance to appear at the end of a VATS sequence when the final target isn't killed. He will then finish the target off himself, ensuring that you will not have to deal with them when the VATS round ends. The first rank gives a 10% chance, the second 12, and the third a 14. The fourth rank doesn't increase the chance, but it will give your critical meter a 50% chance to be filled whenever he does finish off a target. I'm torn on this perk. On one hand it can be a literal lifesaver, but on the other hand, I don't like relying on random chance. Additionally, the stranger's damage isn't infinite, and while it is very rare, it is possible for certain level enemies to survive his shot, completely eliminating the main purpose of this perk in the first place. At the end of the day, it all comes down to how you value your perk points. You're not making a bad choice with Mysterious Stranger, just a somewhat unreliable one. We already covered critical hit damage, so you already know how better criticals work. Each rank of critical banker allows you to store an additional critical hit. It's a very simple but very powerful effect. Critical hits are balanced around the fact that you can only carry one at a time and then have to work your way back up to it after using it, but this perk throws that balance out of the window. You can now carry several at a time and just unload crit after crit onto an enemy's head. There are very few perks in the game that give a power spike like Critical Banker. Grim Reaper Sprint is a perk that has the power to make many others on this list obsolete. The first rank gives a 15% chance for a kill to completely restore all your action points. The second rank grants a 25% chance, while the third not only increases that to 35, but also refills your crit meter when it does proc. While it is based on chance, at max rank, every third kill is going to refund your AP, and with an efficient weapon, that is going to let you keep unleashing vats attacks non-stop. I know I said that I don't like chance-based effects, but unlike the Stranger, the conditions to proc sprint are not nearly as obscure. 4-leaf Clover gives every hit a chance to immediately refill your crit meter. It starts out at 8% and increases only by 2 per rank. The effect is good, but I usually only get the first rank of it early and fill out the rest when I have the points to spare, as there are diminishing returns with the higher ranks. It's another perk that works better with low AP weapons. While the third rank of Ricochet does fill your crit meter when the effect procs, the actual conditions for the Ricochet effect to occur are so rare that I'm only mentioning this perk here because it does, at least in theory, synergize with VATS. Over the 100 plus hours that I've had this perk, I think I've only ever seen it proc once, so it is the only perk on this list that I am actively telling you to avoid. There is one other perk that needs to be mentioned, but it doesn't appear on the perk list, and that is Kill Shot. It is the perk you receive from maxing out your relationship with McCready, and much as with the Sniper perk, it is deceptively good. It adds a flat 20% chance for headshots, this time for all weapons. If you pair that with Sniper, you will always have at least a 45% chance to hit the head with scoped rifles that will be increased even further with perception, range, and anything else you might have. You will frequently have situations where the chance to hit the head is twice as high as the torso, and while it might make your own head spin, it will most definitely make the enemy lose theirs. Fallout 4 has a ton of temporary stat boosts, so I won't be listing all of them, just those that are easy to make and find, or those that give very large boosts. When it comes to buffing VATS, certain chems stand out. Mentats give a +2 to perception, and if you want to go even further, you can turn them into orange mentats. This requires 3 carrots, then you can have a settler grow, and 1 bit of asbestos, that is found in certain junk items, but is no less tasty. Orange mentats not only give a 5-point boost to perception, but it also adds a further multiplicative 10% to the final results. It's not quite the same as a 35% buff from 7 perception, in fact it's actually a little better due to how the calculations work, more like a 40%. By combining regular jet with 5 flamer fuel, you get jet fuel, which not only increases your AP by 35 points, but also boosts your AP regeneration. It does this by adding a 10 points per second AP regeneration effect that can be stacked with natural AP regen and other boosts. I should also mention that Ultra Jet gives a 100 point boost to AP alongside its regular slow time effect, but this doesn't last long, and the slow time is mainly meant to be used outside of VATS. Colmex has really great boosts, a +3 to both agility and perception, and even an additional sneak attack multiplier if you decide to play stealthy. This would be the perfect chem if it weren't for the fact that it cannot be crafted. It can only rarely be found as loot or purchased from vendors. There is one variant of it called Kamex Silk that this nudist merchant starts stocking after you complete the literally unmarked quest to bring him 10 bloodworm meat. Not only does Silk have the same boost as regular Kamex, It also comes with a +3 boost to luck. Silk is actually easier and more reliable to get than regular Comex, so long as you don't kill the guy cooking it. But you know what's even more harmful than drugs? Soft drinks. Nuka-Cola Quantum not only gives a large boost to health, but it also restores 100 points of AP instantly. This is great when you run out in the middle of a fight, or decide to sprint exhausted into a horde of ghouls because you didn't look both ways before crossing the street. You can occasionally find Quantum in Nuka-Cola vending machines, or in certain preset locations. They are kind of rare, but not rare enough to the point where you wouldn't want to make use of them. Certain Nuka-Cola variants added by Nuka World not only restore AP, but also boost it temporarily, but there's a stupid amount of them, and they're not very practical to make or find. Atom blessed the wasteland with a wide variety of creatures to kill and consume. While the effects of cooked meat aren't as high as chems, they also aren't addictive and often last much longer. If you have the Wasteland Survival magazine from Sunshine Tidings, you will collect twice as much as meat from most animals, so it's pretty easy to get so much of it that the pups essentially become constant so long as you keep eating them. Mirelurks drop Mirelurk meat, and more rarely, softshell Mirelurk meat. Cooking the regular variant yields a 10-point boost to AP for 30 minutes, while the cooked softshell meat gives 15 AP for an hour. Mirelurks can be found very reliably near bodies of water, and it's easy to stack up on lots of their meat, especially if you've decided to clear out the castle for the Minutemen. Most places with Mirelurks also have Mirelurk eggs. When mixing these with dirty water, you get Mirelurk egg omelets that each restore 50 AP instantly. This can be used just like Nuka-Cola Quantum, an emergency food to refill AP. The Quantum Mirelurk meat from Nuka World also gives higher AP boosts, but unlike the regular meats, they are finite. But Mirelurks are very kind creatures, as they just keep on giving. Far Harbor introduced a Mirelurk jerky that can be made with Mirelurk meat, 2 tarberries, and a delicious bottle of antifreeze. The jerky buffs your perception by 3 points, and while the secondary ingredients are kind of rare, it is worth keeping an eye out for them. After killing a Deathclaw, you can reward yourself with a Deathclaw steak that gives 1 point of agility for an hour. Deathclaws become more common as you gain levels, and as with the Mirelurks, you can find yourself with more of the stuff than you can eat. Gatorclaw steaks from Nuka World provide the exact same buffs, but unlike Deathclaws, they do not respawn. Far Harbor has the Angler, whose meat gives plus 15 action points for 20 minutes, while Stingwings can be cooked in the Stingwing fillets for an extra point of perception that lasts for an hour. Slocum's Buzz Bites are a unique food item, whose recipe can be found at the Slocum Show's headquarters in Malden. This item requires a Mirelurk egg, dirty water, 1 unit of oil, 3 bits of razor grain, and worst of all, a coffee tin. These are uncommon chunk items that can be found in certain locations and occasionally bought from traders. The end result of combining these many ingredients is something that gives plus 25 points to AP and plus 1 to perception. They are a bit of a pain to make, but still not too rare. Again, there are more items to help with VATS, but these are the ones that I use most often. I've covered certain legendary effects already, so I'll avoid speaking of them here, but now I'll talk about the ones that haven't appeared yet, but have good synergy with VATS. I won't be discussing the obviously good ones, like rapid fire explosive guns or instigating snipers. We know they're good, they just don't stand out with VATS in mind. Enraging weapons cause critical hits to frenzy the target, making them attack everyone around them, even their allies. Keep in mind that their friends will immediately sense when they are frenzied, so they don't need to wait for the target to actually attack first before dealing with them. It doesn't do much at close ranges, but so long as the frenzied target is closer to their allies than you are, they should prioritize them over you. Normally, you'd want to max out the damage dealt with critical hits, but on enraging weapons, it's the opposite. If you're running a pure rifleman build, turn your ranging weapon into a pistol or an automatic. Furthermore, I don't think there's a level cap to this effect, so you can use it on the toughest enemy in the middle of a group and have his friends turn on him. It's a very counterintuitive effect, but not nearly as bad as I've seen some people say. Freezing adds 10 points of energy damage to every shot, but more importantly for us, it causes critical hits to freeze the target, temporarily taking them out of the action. There are some limits though, as larger enemies cannot be frozen, but other than that, it will help keep the heat off of you. Relentless has the effect of causing critical hits to restore all of your action points. The obvious use here is to proc it when your AP is almost out, so it's a good idea to have it on a weapon with low costs. The effect is similar to Grim Reaper's Sprint, but guaranteed, and can be a great alternative if you don't have the luck to spec into it. If you reach the guaranteed critical hit stage with Kung Fu 3, then a relentless weapon will ensure that you will always have full AP after a VAT sequence. Two Shot has no direct synergy with VATs or critical hits, so why is it here? The effect causes you to fire 2 shots for the price of 1 for increased damage at the cost of higher recoil, but the effect is here because 2 Shot has no effect on the listed VAT's hit chance. The secondary bullet still kind of has a mind of its own and can miss, even with a full hit chance, but most of the time it is just free damage without any downsides. Quick Draw is vats-enhanced but worse, as it doesn't come with the accuracy boost. I don't know why the developers made 2 separate effects that reduce cost by the same amount, where one simply does more, but here we are. It is better than a regular gun, but switch to vats-enhanced when available. Weapons aren't the only things with legendary effects. Armor pieces can spawn with them too. The Cunning effect provides a +1 boost to your perception and agility. The guaranteed Cunning Wastelander's chest piece has been on my 250 hours VATS character ever since the first hours, and it is a testament to the effect's usefulness. Lucky armor pieces give +2 luck, while each bit of power the barrel buffs your AP regeneration by 5 points per second, and it can be stacked. VATS-enhanced armor pieces lower the AP cost of your weapon by 10% each, and they are great for mitigating the costs on Sniper 3 builds. Certain legendary items can spawn in the world, either as loot or as stock on vendors, but most of the time, you just have to get lucky with the right gear and effect. There are certain methods to farm legendary items, so it's worth checking them out if you wish to obtain something specific. And that's all there is to know about VATS in Fallout 4. Let me know if I missed something, or if you have your own tips to share.